A father and son travel the countryside looking to carry on the fire of humanity. But is it even worth it? I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today I want to talk about a book that I read, one that has been on my TBR for quite some time, and one that is about the post-apocalypse and father and son relationship. I am referring to The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which was published in 2006. I've talked about Cormac McCarthy on this channel before, so I don't need to go into that great of detail, but Cormac McCarthy was a writer who lived throughout the 1900s and the early 2000s, having died, within like the past 20 years, I think it is. He was primarily known for writing westerns. I think that was his bread and butter, sort of neo-westerns, not really falling into the traps of the traditional western and painting the West as a heroic endeavor, noting that there were, problematic people doing all of that kind of stuff, which you see in Blood Meridian, which is possibly one of my favorite books of all time. And then he also wrote No Country for Old Men, which I read, which I feel is very strongly connected to Blood Meridian, and I'll talk more about that in the analysis section. And he won a number of awards for his work, including being nominated for Pulitzers, among many other things, and I can very much see it. It definitely seems like McCarthy, in his work, was trying to talk about America, noting its flaws as well as some of the things that were pretty good about it. And so without further ado, let's talk about The Road. I'll do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Road focuses on an unnamed man and boy, a father and son, traveling through the ravaged wasteland of presumably a post-apocalypse America. It's not specified what exactly happened, but there were flashes, and I presume that this had something to do with like a nuclear strike, a nuclear war of some kind that pretty much destroyed the entire world. And it should be noted that the boy's mother died shortly after this apocalypse sort of set in. She decided she didn't want to wait for the roving gangs to murder her or rape her or do something worse to her child, and she couldn't deal with it. So she just decided to kill herself, and just by walking off into the wilderness, and didn't really tell the boy at all. But the husband knew and told the son when he woke up from his sleep. He does seem to be a very young boy. If I had to guess his age, it was around 9 or 10. But again, it's not really specified there. I don't think it's actually that important. And the father and son begin traveling to the coast for unspecified reasons that I don't even think they even know. They're gathering supplies. They have a lot of food. The boy has various nightmares, isn't doing too well for himself, and the man appears to be dying of some unspecified illness. He's unsure how long he has to live, but he hopes that he can instill some skills and whatnot in his son in the hopes that his son will survive. The man and the boy find that they are followed on the road by a diesel truck of some sort, but it hasn't seen them, so they duck off into the woods, and they take their cart with them. And when they're in the woods, like, one of the other survivors sees them and is the man has to fire one of the bullets of his gun to kill that man, but then they have to run away to make sure nobody else finds them, because they only have like 2 bullets at this point. And they eventually go back and find that all of their supplies pretty much were taken, and so they find themselves going hungry, don't have a lot to eat. They do a short while later find a cache of supplies in a old farmhouse, which they said was left to them by the good guys, and they're able to take a lot of it, and as they're walking on the road again, they find an old man. The old man is alone and is telling them a lot of lies about himself. The boy gives him some food because he has a kind heart, but the man insists that he's capable of surviving on his own, and they depart at that point. The man seems to be getting worse at this point in the story, knowing that he's near death, and everyone is kind of witnessing death, horrible things that have happened to people, seeing a lot of bones on the road, and also seeing the corpses of babies and whatnot. It's clearly been a bad time in this world. A short while later, they arrive at a beach, but it's all gray and kind of not very sunny as they were kind of hoping. But they're able to sort of relax on the beach for a little bit, and they find a boat that has some supplies which they make use of. Unfortunately, the boy gets sick a little bit later. The man thinks it has something to do with some of the supplies they found, and the man nurses him back to health, which helps. But when they go back to their cart later, they discover that most of the supplies have been taken again, and the man insists that they go and find the person who did it, which they manage to track that person down. And the man holds the gun at this person and forces him to strip, which upsets the boy. And he says, this is what you were going to do to us, so we're going to do it to you. They proceed to take back off with their cart, but the boy insists they go back and leave the clothes, which they do. Although the boy says, the man is probably afraid and won't come back at that point. And as they're walking back through another small town, the man is shot with an arrow in the leg, but manages to scare off the people who were doing the attacking. But the man knows now that he doesn't have long, because this wound is pretty deep. And so they continue walking, knowing that that the man doesn't have for very, very much longer. And the man at one point says they got to sit down because he can't go on, and he sends the boy away, tells him to go down the road and keep going until using the skills that he has, but also to maybe find some of the good guys so that they can form another community. And the boy doesn't really want to do that. At first he does go, but then he comes back and stays with his father while he's dying. And after he dies, he's really sad, and he goes to the road with a gun and waits for someone to come down. It turns out to be a man who was looking for the boy because he saw them pass earlier, and a woman, an overly religious, or not an overly, but just a very religious woman. And the boy asks, are you the good guys? And the man says, I'd like to think so, but you'll never know for sure unless you come with us. And at that point, the boy decides to say goodbye to his father again, and then they take the supplies and go forward to another place. It's a bit unclear what's going to happen to the boy, but it does end on a somewhat optimistic note there. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit worth talking about with The Road. I think Cormac McCarthy writes another pretty high quality book here. Certainly not as complex, I think, as Blood Meridian, or as action packed as No Country for Old Men, but still a pretty good book worth reading. I think if you can get through a couple problems that I'll note about later. I will say I do think this is I think this is part of a secret trilogy with those two other books. You'll hear me say this a lot, Blood Meridian was about our violent past of America. No Country for Old Men was about our violent present, taking place in Reagan America in the 1980s. And then The Road, I think, is our violent future. Here's where the violence has taken us and will lead to if left unchecked. And I don't have any evidence to prove that this is actually a secret trilogy on Cormac McCarthy's part, but I still want to argue it because I think there are a lot of arguments to be made for it. So that's my position. If you disagree, let me know in the comments below. But one of the main themes that McCarthy is working with here is that of the desolate world, the forsaken world. McCarthy depicts a world of nothing but ruin, a world of devastation. There's no place to turn, nothing you can really do, no food, no vegetation, everything is just disgusting, gross, and destroyed. And a lot of this was caused by humans, it seems. Again, there was no exact cause of what caused this devastation, but I believe it's kind of alluding to nuclear war. But you could argue that any amount of devastation was probably caused by humans, unless it was an asteroid of some kind. But I don't think that's what Cormac McCarthy is writing here. And so you end up seeing a lot of bones and ash in this desolate world. There's no vegetation, very little vegetation. You see a lot of burned out trees from various fires, a lot of murder, a lot of dead bodies from that murder, a lot of cannibalism. People are straight up eating each other. There's it's gross, it's awful, and the man and the boy have to keep running to avoid something like that. There's really no hope, but there is kind of an optimism for what the coast might bring. The man and the boy find themselves attracted to the coastline, and they hope that it will prove fruitful, and it kind of does in a way, but mostly they're wrong. The coast is every bit as gray and every bit as dangerous as the main country, like the heart of the country. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. Out there was the gray beach, with the slow combers rolling dull and leaden in the distant sound of it, like the desolation of some alien sea breaking on the shores of a world unheard of. Out on the tidal flats lay a tanker half careened. Beyond that, the ocean vast and cold and shifting heavily, like a slowly heaving vat of slag, and then the gray squall line of ash. And that's a very interesting quote there. It just shows how everything's been destroyed. Like calling it an alien sea. It's not used to it doesn't look like the sea that maybe the man is used to in this story. That this world is filled with like a sense of hopelessness. It's desolate. Nothing can grow. Nothing can thrive in this world. Humans are barely holding on. And it seems like a very hellish place, kind of similar to Blood Meridian, although I would argue that this place is more hellish, because at least in Blood Meridian there were cities, and there was food, there were animals, there were things to see in this world, and there was the company of other humans. But in The Road, there doesn't seem to be much of any of that. Everywhere you turn is a hostile alien place. You can barely drink the water. There's no food, and you're likely to be attacked by roving gangs of blood cults or cannibals. I think McCarthy does a great job of painting this scene for us. It certainly makes the story feel more hopeless, but anything bright and cheery would kind of feel like a cop out there. And again, I think McCarthy does a great job of sort of building that and setting the scene for us. Another thing that McCarthy is writing about here is that of survival. The dad and the boy are determined to carry the fire of humanity. Both of them say that throughout the story. Sort of like, why are we going on? And one of them answers, we are carrying the fire of humanity. We're continuing human existence. That humanity has to survive for one reason or another. And so we are the ones who are doing that. Now, there is a question of, why are we doing that? Like, what about the situation is good? Or like, what are we trying to get to? What is the end result? And how can we possibly survive this unfortunate catastrophic situation? Like, why would you want to survive in that type of situation? The wife even asked this question, pointing out, there's rapists out there, there's people who are going to do harm, and we're going to starve to death. There's no sense in surviving here, because it's never going to get better. This place seems kind of without hope, like it's the desolation there. Allow me to read you another interesting quote from this. Sooner or later, they will catch us and they will kill us. They will rape me. They'll rape him. They are going to rape us and kill us and eat us, and you won't face it. You'd rather wait for it to happen, but I can't. And that's the wife talking to the husband, that's the man in this story, essentially saying, I see what's coming. I see that we're going to die eventually. Whether it's now or in a year or 2 years from now, it doesn't matter. It's going to happen. I can see that. I realize the inevitability of our situation. You can't stand for that. You can't accept that. And I do think, to some extent, like McCarthy is siding with both people here, because yes, that is exactly what happens. People die. The man dies, and it's better not to try to survive in that type of situation. But at the same time, the human spirit requires you to keep going no matter what. That we've been through some of the worst things that humanity has seen. The fall of Rome, the plague, a whole bunch of things. And human beings have managed to persist through everything. We've managed to survive. And so in that way, he might be siding with the man here as well. I think there's arguments for both sides. But there's of course that question of, should humanity carry on? The old man that they come across in this story, who says, death has been through these lands, and maybe it would be better if humanity just died in general, because then the only thing left would be death, and they couldn't have anything. It would just all be gone. And adding on to that, you see in this book all the terrible things that humans are doing to each other, like these human horrors of cannibalism and murdering each other, taking food and forcing them to do depraved or sometimes sad acts to one another. And why would you want to be like that? If you knew your neighbors were capable of doing this, would you want them to be your neighbors anymore? Would you want civilization to happen? And I think to some extent, McCarthy is saying no. What is the point anymore? If this is all humanity has left, then we shouldn't carry on the fire anymore. At some point, we should accept that we are a forsaken, kind of hopeless species. But at the same time, McCarthy also seems to be invoking God here, that we are a God-ordained species. We are going to carry on because that is our religious spiritual quality. That is, we have inherited this earth from God, and so we will carry on, go forward, and produce another civilization, because that is what human beings do. They continue on. And so it does seem like he's trying to have it both ways here. He's trying to say that God has maybe chosen humanity, and that we should continue on no matter what. But I think seeing everything else in this story and seeing what is happening in our own world right now, I have to disagree with him. I say at some point we have to accept that human beings are flawed and maybe not capable of carrying the torch anymore. And even though it'd be great to say that survival is an utmost quality, maybe human beings can't survive. Maybe there's a point where we have a breaking point, and we have to accept that we've lost. Now that's a bit nihilistic, I think, a bit hopeless. But if at a certain point, if survival is going to be too difficult, why? As the wife says, why try? Why try to proceed forward if all you're going to get is that pain and suffering? Another interesting aspect of the story is something that both the man and the son talk about, which is the idea of the good guys versus the bad guys. The dad and the son talk about it a lot, and I think they have to believe that they are doing the right thing in this world, that they are on the right side, because if they're not, then they have to own up to all the horrible things that they're doing, and it kind of goes against their belief system, their sense of religion, because they do invoke God a little bit. I think the man in particular is spiritual, based on some of his internal thought processes. But I do have to say it is a problematic dichotomy, because if you believe that what you're doing is right, you can get away with doing some horrible things. But also, if you think there are people who are wrong, that those are the bad guys, then you can get away with doing awful things to them because they're in the wrong. They should have been better or something like that. And it seems like something that has led to so many problems in our current world, but maybe also led to the problems of how we got to the point in this story. Maybe there was a great war that took place that led to use of nuclear weapons, and it all happened because one side believed they were the good guys and one side believed they were the bad guys. And maybe, again, I think McCarthy's getting at the fact that this might be the human experience, the human condition, to sort of reach these kinds of points, and maybe there's no point or no hope for survival beyond these types of scenarios. Again, this goes back to the idea of our violent future. This is what McCarthy says is the only natural outcome for us, that we're going to reach this point of destruction. Maybe we can hope, as with what happens with the boy in the story, that maybe he might be able to help form a better community down the road. But again, if you have that mindset that there's good and bad, it's just going to lead to that same problem down the road. You're gonna end up coming up with these enemies to fight, these people who are not the chosen ones, who are not the good people, who don't deserve the fruits of paradise, and you're going to try to kill them, and you're going to start start wars, and that'll lead to further problems. And it seems like the only natural outcome there, as I said many times, is just the complete wipeout of humanity. I don't think McCarthy put that there by accident. I think that's definitely there to get the reader to consider the idea of good guys versus bad guys. Now, other aspects of this story that I find interesting are the ideas of the young replacing the old, and also the father-son relationship here. I do think McCarthy's trying to say something, and he like in his sort of talk about the book that he's done before, he's talked about how he's sort of thought of his own son when he's thought about the end of the world and whatnot, and how he would go about working with his son and trying to live with his son in such a scenario. So I do think the father and son dynamic is important there, but relating to the young replacing the old. I think there's a lot there worth discussing, but I don't completely understand it. I think McCarthy's really trying to grab onto something that no matter how many times I was reading and rereading certain passages, I just couldn't grasp what it is he was trying to say. Something about the young replacing the old, preparing your children for a better future. Although I wouldn't say you're preparing your child for a better future here, because now he has to he has to deal with the wastelanders, the cannibals, and the other such awful people that are making life difficult. So I do think there's something interesting there, and if you can maybe provide a good understanding, let me know in the comments below. But I feel like there's something that I'm missing there that maybe McCarthy isn't fully able to grab onto, and I think other reviewers have acknowledged that as well. But those reviewers also said that McCarthy was telling a hell of a story here. So I think you can maybe have a great book without fully grasping that point. I also like how there doesn't seem to be any real hope in this story. So the ending never really feels like a cop-out. The ending is sure, the boy goes with these people, but are they going to make life miserable for them? Is he going to be able to thrive in this new community? Is he going to be thinking about his parents? Is he going to choose not to survive at some point? We don't really know, and I like that it's left kind of open-ended there, because if it were too clean of an ending, I feel like, again, it would be a cop-out. But because there's that feeling of hopelessness throughout the story, it never feels like McCarthy's really sacrificing his vision. And I will note that for a McCarthy book, at least for the ones that I've read so far, it does feel like an unusually optimistic ending, because in Blood Meridian, for example, that ends pretty devastatingly with the main character kind of getting annihilated by the judge in the story. And I feel like if this were Blood Meridian, this boy would get murdered by these people coming down the road. But not every story needs to necessarily be dark, which is, I think, something McCarthy fortunately realizes here. But there are a couple of weird parts of the story that I don't really like. I do think it's hard to get into because a lot of it's just walking. It's characters walking from place to place, looking for houses, looking for supplies, finding those supplies, eating, and talking a little bit. So it's mostly meandering around, walking around, which can be a little bit difficult because there's no substance there or juice with Blood Meridian or No Country for Old Men. But I will say Blood Meridian also felt a lot like walking around, but the inherent sort of awful truth of humanity underlying that story kind of made it stood out, and that is that humanity is willing to betray one another for any amount of money, for any amount of reward, and we're definitely not cut out for community. I think that's what Blood Meridian is at least trying to say. If you want something of more substance, maybe this book wouldn't really get you going there, but it's still worth reading, I think. And then I do think maybe McCarthy should have done something different with the second half of the story. The first half should have been the man teaching the son how to do things and then dying, and then the second half is the boy trying to do something with that, trying to survive, and maybe eventually being taken in. But it would have been cool to see him sort of learn from his father and enact those skills, and maybe try to do things that his father never taught him, as a way of showing how he's becoming his own person. I think that would have been a very interesting story to read. It's probably not the story that McCarthy's trying to tell here, and I think it's more, this is what I wanted, and if I guess if I want to see that in the world, I should go write it on my own. But I just wanted to note that McCarthy could have done a little bit more with the second half in this story. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Road by Cormac McCarthy. A very good book, high quality, definitely one of the better ones that I've read recently. I feel like I always have a good time with a Cormac McCarthy book. He's a very solid writer. Even if he's hard to get into at first, it's always a learning curve, like reading the first several pages, because he writes in a very unusual style. Doesn't write any quotes for his characters talking, and very short and to the point at times, but also willing to go on like long tangents and long sentences. So you get quite a doozy of a read with a Cormac McCarthy book. And I do recommend this. Like, again, it can be hard to get into, but I do think it's worth reading. It's worth seeking out, especially if you've read some of Cormac McCarthy's books in the past, like I have. So yeah, if you have any comments to say on my review here, you simply want to tell me what you thought of the book, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this author or this book if they don't already know. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and road traveling travels. Farewell.